Even though Christmas is just a few days away, I'm not sure if I want to celebrate it this year. My favorite time of year used to be the holidays, but this year it feels vacant. Snowflakes softly fall outside my window, blanketing the city in a lovely white blanket. Yes, it is lovely, but that doesn't alter my inner feelings. I'm Mai Harris, a 25-year-old city dweller who works in advertising. And I'm a little lost right now. For those of you who are accused to the hectic pace of the Christmas season, baking, buying, and decorating, this year is different. I'm by myself. It's also more difficult than I anticipated, as much as I hate to say it. My husband, Mike, ought to be here. Normally, it's him who gets really thrilled about Christmas. He's halfway across the world now, though. I haven't seen Mike in months. He is a military physician stationed in a conflict area. We have brief phone conversations and even shorter texts. The man in the messages is no longer even someone I recognize. You may understand how I feel if you have ever been in a long-distance relationship, especially when the distance is so great. It's solitary, incredibly lonely. I've had my eyes fixed on the Christmas tree. It is still just partially ornamented. I imagined that Mike and I were decorating it together, as we always did. I can't even finish it now, though. Is that how anyone else feels? Like when you're missing someone, even the tiniest things feel too big. As usual, my 3-year-old golden retriever, Dodo, is lying beside me. These days, he is the only company I have. To be honest, I don't think I could survive these evenings without him. He is devoted, caring, and constantly present, but he's not Mike. It's not the same. This Christmas pet show flyer has been on my coffee table for days, so I finally pick it up. It sounds absurd, don't you think? A show for pets? I'm not sure, but it might be something to lift my spirits. I mean, in order to feel like I'm not merely cruising through the holidays, I need something tangible to concentrate on. Have any of you ever taken a completely arbitrary action to relieve your loneliness? Something akin to a pet exhibition, perhaps? Please let me know if I'm the only one looking for strategies to get through this season. I say out loud, almost in jest, well, maybe Dodo and I could do this. I swear, though, as I turn to face him, he is well aware of my thoughts. When his tail begins to wag, I momentarily lose all sense of reality. What do you think, then? Shall Dodo and I try it out? Or am I merely looking for a little holiday magic to get me through this lonely time of year? I would love to know what you think. When Dodo and I arrived at the Christmas pet show, I wasn't sure what I was anticipating, but it was definitely not what I received. The enormous excitement in the room was the first thing that struck me when we got there. There are people everywhere, dogs running around, some performing tricks, and some simply being adorable and wagging their tails. It was tumultuous, enjoyable, and slightly frightening. I quickly glanced through the packet that the registration desk handed me. The Advanced Obedience and Trick Challenge was one of the categories that particularly drew my attention. I briefly had the following thought, what am I doing here? Dodo is a decent dog, but does he have advanced obedience issues? It's been months since I last trained him. But then I remembered how much Dodo had supported me over this whole ordeal. He was the one who snuggled up with me every night, regardless of my tears or sense of emptiness. Perhaps this challenge will help us both get out of our rut. And to be honest, this was the time to do something that would make me feel somewhat alive again. With Christmas approaching, everything seemed to be away. I required a diversion. Dodo was joyfully wagging his tail when I looked at him. I grinned for a moment. Okay, Dodo, let's do this. For us. Getting your dog to roll over when you say yes was an easy first task. All right, we can handle this, I thought. Dodo is capable. However, Dodo froze the moment I gave him the order. No answer. Nothing. I felt my face flush as the people around us began to whisper. I gave it another go. And once more. Nothing. He wasn't known for not listening. An overwhelming sense of frustration washed over me. Dodo was sniffing the floor now, totally unaware of the business at hand, when I peered down at him. Come on, friend. I whispered under my breath, practically begging, please. I glanced around at the other competitors, who were completing their assignments with ease. I could not get rid of the sense that I was completely out of place, and I felt the weight of their judgment and stares. My thoughts were interrupted by a voice. Hey, don't worry. From behind me, a man said, it's more difficult than it seems. Eric, the volunteer who had been assisting with the ceremony, was there when I turned around. When we first met that morning, his enthusiasm was contagious, that is. My, you have a fantastic puppy. He clearly needs a little more self-assurance. Simply give it another go carefully. Even though I wasn't sure how much assistance I would receive, I nodded. Thanks, I responded, attempting to seem assured despite my internal conflict. We tried to get Dodo to roll over for the next hour. He made poor progress at first, but after a few more attempts, he succeeded. It wasn't flawless, but it was sufficient. And I had a brief wave of relief. It was more about perseverance and doing something than it was about winning. I started to notice that the more time I spent with Dodo, the more at ease I felt, and Eric was observing from the sidelines, encouraging him anytime he saw him struggle. It was more than simply his advice. It was his presence and the way he supported me in overcoming my annoyance without passing judgment. Even though I had no idea what I was doing, his serene aura gave me the impression that I wasn't failing. However, I couldn't help but think of Mike even during those times of connectedness. If he were here, I wondered what he would say. Would Eric have encouraged me, or would he have scoffed at my awkward attempts? My heart hurt in unexpected ways from the loneliness of being separated from him. I observed that Eric and I began to operate more in unison as the competition progressed. He gave me small tips on how to talk to Dodo more effectively, and gradually our cooperation got better. With each practice session, Dodo and I became closer, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive, not merely needed. The lengthy waiting evenings and the lonely phone conversations with Mike appeared to vanish into the distance. Unlike Mike, Eric was not burdened by the demands of military service or the burden of a faraway relationship. However, there was something calming about him. Perhaps it was because, for the first time in a long time, he made me remember what it was like to be genuinely seen. Eric chuckled after a particularly effective trick, saying, "You're getting it, my Dodo, and you make a fantastic team." My heart skipped a beat when he said those words. I instantly shook the emotion away. I don't need this at the moment. However, something inside of me clicked as the competition drew to a close. Mike was no longer the only reason I lived. I was also beginning to live for myself. Dodo and I failed to take home any of the major prizes at the end of the competition. However, that was irrelevant. The fact that we had pushed ourselves farther than I had previously believed, and that I had found a part of myself that I had believed had been lost, was what mattered. After the event that evening, Dodo curled up at my feet as I sat by myself in my apartment once more. Mike hadn't gotten back to me all day. As I noticed that Mike's name was showing on the screen as my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat. However, it wasn't a call when I opened the message. Thinking of you. It was another short text. I hope you're doing okay. I'll call soon. My eyes filled with tears. I experienced an emotional outburst for the first time in months that I was unaware I was suppressing. The void in my chest had been getting louder and bigger, but it seemed to be fading now, only slightly. Mike hadn't given a call. He wasn't present. Every text message and phone conversation was farther away and shorter than the one before it. It seemed like our distance from one another had simply grown. In actuality, though, his silence made the loneliness intolerable. I was missing him more and more each day. I glanced down at Dodo, who had been by my side the entire time. As usual, he felt the sadness and pressed his nose into my hand. At the previous 2 weeks, we had devoted numerous hours to training, education, and even giggling at our meager competition triumphs. I was able to find some tranquility during those times when all I could see was his devoted presence. Our close relationship had developed in a way I hadn't anticipated. I put my palm lightly on Dodo's fur and grinned softly. "I also missed you," I said in a heartfelt whisper. "We're going to be okay. I'll wait for him, but we'll be okay." Though it didn't completely go away, the loneliness felt more tolerable in some way. Hope was now able to fill the void that had before felt so oppressive. In that silent moment with Dodo at my side, I came to the realization that Christmas didn't have to be a lifeless occasion. Something fresh, something I had never witnessed before, was in the air now. Connections, little but significant moments that were transforming me. In addition to showing me how much more there was to life, even when everything else felt uncertain, Dodo had supported me in ways I could not have predicted during the pet show experiences. Even while I waited for Mike, I began to think that perhaps something better, something more satisfying, was in store for me down the road. Eric stayed in contact in the days after the pet show. He would message me to inquire about Dodo's well-being, always using a straightforward yet considerate approach. He would text, "How's Dodo today?" Still mastering those tricks. And then include a smiling emoji. Even though they were brief, each message he sent me gave me a sense of connection I wasn't aware I was missing. His remarks were like a fleeting burst of warmth during a time when everything seemed so cold and far away. "Dodo looked fantastic at the show, Mai. Continue to do well with him," he would say. "I think he's got some real potential." Even though his communications were nice, I couldn't help but feel something. Even while it wasn't the same as my relationship with Mike, it was still something soothing. Even though I understood it was only a friendship, I started to look forward to them. However, Eric's generosity made me feel appreciated, which I hadn't experienced in a while. Eric asked Dodo and I to meet him at the park one afternoon so we could catch up and let Dodo play with other dogs. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't want to misinterpret my emotions, but I felt compelled to leave. In addition to the fact that I didn't have much else to do, perhaps some fresh air would help me decompress. I therefore concurred. While Eric and I were seated on a bench at the park, Dodo was playing joyfully with the other dogs. We had easy conversations about life, work, and everything else. It seemed normal, as though we had known one another for a longer period of time than we actually had. I liked how he listened, and his presence was soothing. Regardless of how at ease I was, though, this notion kept coming back to me. This isn't what I need right now. It was only a friendship, but every time he chuckled or his eyes briefly locked with mine, I couldn't help but feel drawn in. As we watched Dodo play, Eric remarked, "Mai, you're doing an amazing job with Dodo. His significance to you is obvious." My heart twitched a little as I grinned. I felt a little weak as I said, "He's everything I have right now." Eventually, we both stood up to go. "I'm glad we got to hang out," Eric replied, turning to face me. "It's good to know that you and Dodo are doing well. Both of you have made great progress." I tried to ignore the slight twitch of disappointment in my chest as I nodded. There was a sense of hope that perhaps, just possibly, there might be more, but it wasn't that I wanted more. However, I was aware that I needed to remind myself that this was just friendship. Not much more. We said our goodbyes, and as Dodo and I left, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that something had changed within me. Even though my desire for Mike was remained intense and unrelenting, I was now also considering Eric. I was beginning to doubt my feelings because of his generosity, the way he listened, and the fact that I felt seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. When I got home, Dodo snuggled up at my feet while I sat down on the couch. I kept looking at my phone, wondering whether Mike would call or send me a text. He didn't. Rather, Eric sent me a text message to check in once more. Mai. How is Dodo doing this evening? I hope both of you are doing well. My chest began to quiver strangely, but it soon turned into a dull discomfort. Like an unquenchable hunger, the desire for Mike grew increasingly strong. Even though I felt cared about by Eric's messages, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the kind of love I needed or desired. However, I became aware that I was still waiting during these peaceful times when Dodo was with me. I was waiting for Mike to return home, for him to put things right, to fill the void that seemed to be becoming bigger every day. Although it was nice, Eric's friendship wasn't what I was seeking. However, I couldn't help but worry whether I was grabbing for something that was out of my reach. Or did I simply fear that I would only experience the hollow pain in my chest? The day was Christmas Eve. I had just finished setting the table for a little, quiet meal in the dimly lighted apartment. Once brimming with happiness and coziness, the holiday season suddenly seemed chilly and remote. Even with the trees' gentle twinkling in the corner, there was still a sense of emptiness. I couldn't resist checking my phone every few minutes while I was setting the candles on the table in the hopes of receiving a message, a call, or anything else from Mike. But there was no sound on the screen. A knock on the mica interrupted my plans to pour myself a glass of wine. I opened it with a mixture of curiosity and a glimmer of hope that it may be Mike, who was finally coming home for the holidays, but I wasn't expecting anyone. Instead, I saw Eric standing there with a small, excited-looking dog on a leash in one hand and a bouquet of flowers in the other. Astonishment. Eric entered the apartment with a kind grin. "Mai, have a Merry Christmas." I was surprised. "Eric, I didn't anticipate you." His eyes were gentle as he smiled. "I believed you needed some companionship." He gestured to the adorable little terrier at his side, who was wagging its tail excitedly, saying, "Dodo has a new friend to play with. Bella is her name." I hoped she and Dodo would get along. Dodo instantly began sniffing about Bella, his tail swinging wildly, and I couldn't help but giggle. With a tiny twinge of warmth coursing through me, I remarked, "Well, I think they're already best friends." Astonished by Eric's consideration, I accepted the bouquet with gratitude. "I'm grateful, Eric. This is very considerate of you," he said. "It's nothing," and entered the living room. "I wanted to ensure that you wouldn't be spending Christmas by yourself." I was reminded of how lonely I had been these past few months, and that made me appreciate his gesture even more. I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. With a gentle grin, I motioned for him to take a seat. I tried to seem positive as I said, "I actually made a little dinner. Just a little party for us. You know, a little holiday cheer." Eric's face brightened. "That sounds ideal." Candles flickered softly between us as we sat down to a quiet dinner. Despite the careful setting of the table, something seemed to be missing. The sense of emptiness seemed to increase each time I checked my phone in the hopes of seeing a message from Mike. Our chat went naturally since Eric was a pleasure to talk to. He shared with me tales of his early years, his passion for animals, and his aspirations to start an animal shelter in the future. Even though I listened carefully and relished the warmth of his company, I couldn't completely let go of the dream that Mike would call. I kept thinking about what it would be like if Mike were here while we sipped our wine. It seemed so far away now to picture him laughing with us at the table. Tonight, in some way, the silence of his absence was heavier. I took another look at my phone, but nothing was there. Eric gently drew me out of my reverie with the words, "Mai, I realize it's difficult. Spending the holidays apart from the people you care about." Startled by his comprehension, I looked him in the eye. I muttered, "Yeah," as a knot formed in my throat. All I do is wait for him to call. Isn't it absurd? However, I'm at a loss on how else to feel. "It's not silly," he murmured quietly. "You're missing him. And that's all right. You're not alone though. Dodo is with you. Bella is with you. Additionally, I'm with you." His words made me feel a weird mix of remorse and comfort. He wasn't Mike, and I wasn't prepared to give up on the possibility that Mike may return in the future. But then I understood that Eric had supported me when I needed someone, even if it was only for a nice gesture or a few hours. We went to the couch after supper, Bella sitting next to Eric and Dodo cuddled up at my feet. The room was filled with a gentle, cozy glow as the lights on the Christmas tree flickered. The sense that something was missing persisted in my mind. However, as I sat there enjoying my wine and spoke with Eric, I couldn't help but think that having someone to spend this time with was pleasant. We chatted until the evening grew dark, and then Eric got up and gave me a soft embrace when it was time for him to go. "Happy Christmas, he remarked in a kind and heartfelt tone. "You're not alone, I hope you know that." I held the micer open while nodding and grinning a little. "I'm grateful, Eric, for everything." Even though he was gone, I could still feel his presence in the apartment as I watched him stroll down the corridor. After glancing at Dodo, who was still snuggled up next to me, I took another look at my phone, where I was still waiting for the missed call. My phone was still beside me, its screen blank and dark. I took a quick look at the Christmas tree, whose gentle flickering lights only served to emphasize how alone I really felt. My fingers trembled a little as I picked up the wine glass once more. It felt overwhelming to feel empty inside. The crushing weight of the entire holiday season. Everything that should have felt cozy and hopeful but was only a reminder of what I didn't have, was more than just Mike's absence. I had been sitting there looking at my phone's dark screen for a long time before I eventually raised the glass to my lips. As I swallowed, the wine scorched my throat. It tasted familiar yet uninteresting, like my own feelings. I filled a second glass, then another. Although it didn't improve my mood, it temporarily dulled the pain. The minutes went by slowly, and I felt the pressure of the outside world increasing with every drink. I felt like the only thing preventing me from going totally insane was the wine. Dodo, who had been sitting calmly at my side, could sense the change in my mood, so I looked down at him. The only thing keeping me rooted were his eyes, which were filled with warmth and loyalty. "Dodo, why hasn't he called?" With a cracked voice, I whispered. I eventually started crying, something I had been suppressing all evening. "Why does it seem like he's never coming back?" Dodo pressed his head against my leg and offered his silent consolation. As always, he was there for me, but even his presence was unable to satisfy the void inside. Having Mike here, comforting me and assuring me that everything will be all right, was different. I missed the warmth of his voice and his connection. Instead, all that remained was the weight of my own despair, the solitude, and the distance. With blurred vision, I took another big gulp from my glass. Although it didn't help, the booze temporarily blocked off the pain. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the couch as a wave of vertigo overcame me. My heart felt much heavier than my body. "Dodo," I muttered, my voice a little slurred. "Why must it always be so difficult?" As if making a solemn vow to stick by me, Dodo crawled up beside me and curled up against my side. The only thing that felt real at that time was his warmth and presence. I gripped him and stroked my fingers through his fur, letting the tears flow freely despite the agony and chaos. It seemed as though I was now able to experience the grief I had been suppressing for so long because I was drunk. Something changed in that silence, somehow. My once depressing thoughts started to lighten. The edges of my sorrow were mellowed by a dreamy mist that descended upon me. Dodo's steady breathing turned into a lullaby, relieving the pain in my chest. That night, the loneliness vanished for the first time. He turned to me, and I turned to him. In that silent conversation, we discovered a mutual understanding that words could never describe. The following morning, as I awoke, the room was painted in shades of gold by the sunlight streaming through the windows. I felt alive. A feeling of rejuvenation tingled through my body, as though the weight of the previous evening had been removed. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, I felt warm, just like the covers that were wrapped around me. Dodo was lying next to me, and I wasn't sure if what had transpired was appropriate. It might not have mattered. I just knew that I was experiencing a calm serenity at that very moment. The Christmas tree in the corner continued to sparkle, its lights no longer serving as a recall of past happiness but as a promise of fresh starts. And I knew I was ready as I observed the new day unfolding in front of me. I'm prepared to welcome this Christmas as the start of something new, for the present and the future, rather than as a reflection of the past. Don't you think it's funny? I'd like to talk to you. Have you ever experienced a connection like that? One that continues to occupy your thoughts years later? Tell us about yourself. How, or did you move on? Tell me in the comments section below. Your opinions and experiences would be greatly appreciated. And know that you're not alone if you're experiencing something similar at the moment. Time may alter anything, but what about the emotions we harbor deep within? They are not always gone.